When INFJs stop forcing themselves to be overly social, a profound transformation begins to unfold. For much of their lives, INFJs often feel immense pressure to blend into a world that prizes extroversion, fast-paced conversations, constant group interactions, small talk, and the visible hustle of social achievement. But these things, while sometimes necessary, often leave INFJs feeling drained, disconnected from themselves, and even resentful of how much energy they expend just try to keep up. The moment an INFJ allows themselves to stop pretending to enjoy what doesn't come naturally, like shallow social interactions or always being on in social situations, something shifts deeply inside. A soft, liberating clarity takes hold. They no longer spend as much time overanalyzing how they're perceived or trying to craft the perfect response that keeps everyone comfortable. Instead, they begin listening more to their internal rhythm. Silence becomes sacred again. Solitude turns from a place of perceived weakness to a space of realignment, healing, and creative awakening. Check out our INFJ Mastery course and INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video. Without the pressure to be overly social, INFJs begin reconnecting with their inner world in a deeper, more intuitive way. They realize how much they've been numbing their own thoughts, insights, and emotions just to appear more outwardly acceptable or normal. Freed from the expectation to always be available or engaged, their creativity flourishes. They read more, write more, think more clearly. Their dreams, visions, and inner sense of direction grow sharper. That innate INFJ wisdom, the part of them that knows what people need, what the world lacks, and what's truly meaningful, rises to the surface again, unfiltered. Relationships, though fewer, grow richer. The INFJ who no longer forces themselves into the wrong social situations begins to attract the right ones. They become magnetic not because they're always present in the spotlight, but because they radiate presence when they do show up. People sense the peace they carry, the integrity in their silence, the thoughtfulness in their words. There's a calm confidence in the way they interact, free of performative pressure. They no longer chase social validation, but instead hold space for genuine, soul-nourishing connection. Emotionally, they begin to feel lighter. The constant tension of self-betrayal, the feeling that they are faking their way through life to fit and dissolves. They stop feeling guilty for declining invitations, for needing days to recharge, or for preferring one-on-one conversations to crowded events. They embrace their sensitivity instead of treating it like a flaw, and they recognize that being selective with their energy is not selfish. It's self-respect. This doesn't mean they become hermits or shut people out. It means they become more intentional. They engage where they feel aligned, where their gifts of empathy, insight, and deep listening can truly serve. They start setting boundaries that protect their peace without apologizing. And most importantly, they begin trusting that their way of being in the world, quiet, reflective, emotionally intelligent, is not inferior, but invaluable. In stepping away from the noise, INFJs reclaim their voice. In stepping back from the crowd, they move closer to purpose. And in no longer faking extroversion, they begin to experience a profound form of freedom. The freedom to be themselves, fully and unapologetically. When they stop trying to force sociability, the first thing that becomes startlingly apparent is how much time and energy they've spent on things that don't truly nourish them. The social masks begin to fall away. INFJs no longer feel the need to perform, laughing at jokes they don't find funny, nodding through conversations that feel hollow, or staying in relationships that run on obligation rather than connection. They stop feeling responsible for other people's comfort when it costs them their peace. In this release, their nervous systems begin to relax. They sleep better. They breathe deeper. Their emotional landscape begins to stabilize, not because life is suddenly easier, but because they are no longer living in internal conflict. Creatively, this shift is monumental. INFJs are often deeply imaginative, intuitive creators, but that creativity becomes suppressed when they spend too much energy on social performance. Once they reclaim their solitude, the fog lifts. Ideas begin to flow. Visions clarify. Whether it's writing, music, teaching, design, or any other soul-aligned expression, they now have space to hear the whisper of inspiration again. And because they're no longer scattering their energy, trying to be everything for everyone, their work begins to carry greater depth, purpose, and resonance. Spiritually, INFJs often report a feeling of coming home to themselves. They remember who they were before they were told who they should be. They reconnect with their innate wisdom, their rich inner life, and their sense of being guided by something greater, be it intuition, conscience, or spiritual insight. Rather than seeking constant external input or validation, they turn inward for clarity. Their decision-making becomes more rooted and confident. They stop needing permission to rest, to say no, to be quiet, to go deep instead of wide. Their empathy also undergoes a transformation. Instead of being the compulsive fixer, the default therapist, or the quiet emotional sponge in every group, the INFJ begins to choose when and where to offer their support. They become more discerning, asking, is this truly my role here? Do I have the energy for this? Is this person ready for what I have to give? And in doing so, their empathy becomes a conscious gift rather than a passive burden. They become more powerful, not because they are louder, but because they are more aligned. There's also an unexpected strengthening of identity. By no longer diluting themselves to fit in, INFJs begin to define themselves not by how others see them, but by what they know to be true about themselves. They embrace their depth, their idealism, their inner contradictions. They become more comfortable with being misunderstood, knowing that their worth isn't determined by how widely accepted they are, but by how truthfully they live. They stop over-explaining and start embodying. This inner alignment draws kindred spirits to them, other deep thinkers, feelers, visionaries. Friendships that once felt like effort are replaced by soul-level connections. Most profoundly, INFJs who stop faking sociability reclaim time to reflect, to dream, to heal, to build something that matters. Their lives begin to reflect what they value: authenticity, depth, beauty, purpose, impact. They stop chasing the busy noise of life and start cultivating a quiet, meaningful rhythm that allows them to thrive. It's not a retreat from the world. It's a reentry on their own terms. And in that shift, they finally make peace with who they are. They discover that their quiet power, once hidden under the pressure to perform, is exactly what the world needs more of. As the INFJ fully leans into this new way of being, one that honors their inner world rather than betraying it to meet external expectations, they begin to experience a deeper level of psychological integration. The inner conflict that once pulled them in opposite directions, between their need for connection and their craving for solitude, between being liked and being real, begins to resolve. They stop trying to be two people, the person the world expects and the person they truly are. Instead, they allow those two selves to merge. This integration brings a sense of peace that's hard to describe, like finally exhaling after holding your breath for years. They no longer judge themselves for needing more alone time than others. They stop comparing their social habits to the cultural narrative of success, which often equates busyness and visibility with worth. Instead, they create a new metric for success, one based on alignment, energy integrity, and depth of impact. They begin to understand that not every invitation requires a yes. Not every connection deserves access to their heart, and not every moment needs to be filled with noise. In this space, their true power emerges, the ability to see beyond the surface of things, to intuit patterns that others miss, and to connect seemingly unrelated ideas in ways that inspire and uplift. They also develop a new relationship with time. When they're no longer caught in the whirlpool of constant social engagement or people-pleasing, time slows down. Their days feel more intentional. They notice more the subtle shifts in emotion, the beauty in quiet places, the pull of ideas taking shape. Their thoughts are no longer drowned out by external chatter, so they can hear their own voice more clearly. And what that voice has to say is often profoundly wise, because it comes from a place of long observation, deep reflection, and an instinctive understanding of human nature. In relationships, INFJs begin showing up more authentically. Instead of adapting themselves to fit every dynamic, they bring their whole, unmasked self to the table, And this actually makes their relationships more real, more reciprocal, and more fulfilling. They no longer feel the need to entertain or manage others' emotional reactions. They stop tiptoeing around the truth. And when they speak, they do so from a place of clarity and conviction. Their honesty becomes a quiet form of leadership. People start to trust them more, not because they're always agreeable, but because they're deeply genuine. The quality of their boundaries also improves. INFJs who once felt guilty for saying no begin to recognize that boundaries are not walls. They're invitations for healthier dynamics. They protect their energy not out of fear, but out of reverence for what they carry. They know their worth. They understand that just because they can help doesn't mean they should, and just because they're invited doesn't mean it's aligned. This clarity brings strength, and this strength invites a more balanced, harmonious life. Another remarkable shift is that INFJs begin to operate less from fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of disappointing others, and more from trust. Trust in their inner compass, trust in their timing, trust that living truthfully, even if it means fewer people understand them, will always lead to deeper fulfillment. They begin to detach from the need for constant external validation, which once made them feel like imposters in their own skin. Instead, they start rooting themselves in internal validation. Am I living in integrity with my values? Am I honoring my energy today? Am I making space for what really matters? This inner freedom unlocks a sense of empowerment that is calm, not loud, steady, not showy. They no longer need to prove their worth in social currency. They're no longer desperate to be seen, because they are finally seeing themselves clearly. And this is when the INFJ's quiet leadership truly emerges, not in dominance, but in resonance. They influence others not by forcing attention, but by being a mirror for depth, authenticity, and soulfulness. As the INFJ continues walking this quieter, more authentic path, they begin to realize that their natural wiring was never the problem. It was the world's misunderstanding of it that created the dissonance. The pressure to conform, to entertain, to be constantly accessible had buried their true brilliance beneath layers of fatigue and self-doubt. But now, freed from those expectations, they discover that their gentleness is a strength. Their quiet is full of life. Their depth is not something to apologize for. It's the very essence of what makes them so rare and valuable. When they're no longer spread thin by superficial interactions, the INFJ can pour more deeply into the few relationships that truly matter. They cultivate connection over performance, presence over popularity. Their friendships become sanctuaries, spaces where meaningful dialogue, emotional honesty, and spiritual resonance can thrive. These aren't relationships based on convenience or proximity, but on mutual soul recognition. And because the INFJ is no longer pretending, they attract people who love them for their essence, not the social mask they used to wear. And perhaps most powerfully, when INFJs stop pretending to enjoy excessive socializing, they stop abandoning themselves. This self-loyalty becomes a kind of spiritual armor, not to block others out, but to hold themselves together. They stop betraying their needs just to belong. They stop overextending themselves just to be liked. And they stop shrinking their depth to match the surface of the world around them. They know now that their sensitivity is not fragility, it is insight. Their introversion is not awkwardness, it is presence. Check out our INFJ Mastery course and INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video.